Good evening, everybody. It is Wednesday, September 14th, 2016. I thought about this webinar because I think essentially a lot of the training of a therapist is to understand what is said beneath the words that are used. And I think if it wasn't that way, if what we said is always what we meant, I think we'd have a lot less difficulty in relationships. Feelings would be easy to understand, communicate, and so forth. But because what we say doesn't match what we mean a lot of the time, I think we get ourselves into trouble. So part of this is about communication skills. Part of this is about awareness. Tonight I want to talk about some things that I think are common things that we actually do say out loud and the harm that they can do to each other and to our children, and what might be, if we look a couple of layers deeper, what might be the real meaning of that or what's really going on in the relationship. First, I want to talk about meta-communication in general. These are several quotes from my book where I explain the I feel statement, Communication 101. And in the training of meta-communication, we begin to understand the hidden agendas in our communication. The goal of communication skills often is to help us, like I said, uncover what we are really saying. Part of our therapist training is the process of understanding what is being said over the content of the communication. In our relationships, that can be pretty difficult. Meta message refers to the meaning of the communication or the message beneath the message. We all know what it feels like when our parent or spouse says one thing to us and means something else. This meaning could be intended or subconscious on the part of the person saying it. So it doesn't have to be conscious, right? Some of these things I'm going to give you tonight are very, very conscious. They are actually what we think. Some of them are unconscious. And I'll talk about, again, the difference between them and the harm that it can do. Honesty, self-awareness, and transparent dialogue are the simplest ways to improve the consistency between what is said and what is meant. Oftentimes, we need a guide through this process because I think we take for granted what we say. Sometimes when I'm coaching somebody, I just finished an intensive this afternoon, and there were several times when I coached somebody and they didn't even know what they had just said. They didn't know the words that they had used. So having somebody be able to listen and pull you back to that and point it out can be helpful in this process. We can often discover the meta message by asking ourselves tough questions about our intent. Practicing the I feel statement can be a way to uncover our authentic motivations because we're, for example, talking about what we hope that we can't control, what we hope that we can control. We're starting to understand the difference between what we think or believe and the events that are transpiring in front of us or in our lives. And of course, the feelings and where they come from. They come from that belief about that. We had an example this week at the intensive where I said something and somebody said, oh, I couldn't say that to myself. And my response was, I don't have that same value. You know, when I say I'm an idiot, for example, it doesn't come layered with shame or guilt or embarrassment. It comes with confidence. It comes with an awareness that I'm human and an acceptance of that. And that was the example statement that I used. Healthy communication is about aligning what we mean with what we say. When people say to me, that's not what I meant, my response is, then say it. Say what you mean. You know, say what, if you have a question, ask a question. If you have a comment or a belief, state that and be clear about what you're saying. And so communication skill is about, I think of it, I think when we think of mindfulness, we think of somebody sitting in the lotus position. Whereas when I think about therapy, I think it's a mindful activity. Sometimes the I feel statement, I'll explain to the clients in the field, it is a talking meditation, right? You're becoming aware of what you think, what you feel, what you believe, what you're interpreting. You're becoming aware of what you want, what you're asking for from the others. You're becoming aware of what you can and can't control. All of that is mindfulness, being present with yourself and what's going on inside. So meta-communication is that study of those things. So without further ado, let's get into the 12 things that we never to say to our children. The first one, and is the most prolific, is don't feel. And this is one, again, where we don't say it using those words. Very rarely does somebody say don't feel. However, people actually do say things like, don't feel scared. Don't feel upset. Don't be angry. Backing away from that, they'll say things like, I don't want you to be angry. I don't want you to be sad. I don't want you to be upset. But much more subtly than that, we do it in these ways. It's insidious because it's expressed covertly. When a child expressed anger or frustration at school, teacher, siblings, or parent tells them not to feel it by trying to reason them out of it. Look at it this way, or you shouldn't hate your brother, or the kids were just jealous of you, or I was just trying to help you. Sometimes it comes in the justifications that we have. All right, if I can explain to you why I did what I did, that I was trying, what my intent was, the message is then you wouldn't be upset, then you wouldn't be hurt, then you wouldn't be angry. So we say it all the time, constantly, right? In our relationships. It takes a tremendous amount of practice to make progress in this area. And even though I've been trained in this and I do trainings in this, of course, for decades now, I still at times fall into this trap. All of these kinds of statements contain the meta message of don't feel what you're feeling. The opposite is listening without judgment or without the need for the child to feel anything other than what they are feeling. You know, I was talking with somebody, and I've talked about this in a parent meeting recently, where somebody was describing a child of theirs and how depressed and deflated they were feeling in their life, even to a scary extent. And we talked about perhaps beginning to listen to that feeling more, sit with it more. That oftentimes that's the healing balm for the other, the empathic response, rather than trying to talk them or teach them out of it. So learning to listen is the antidote, if you will, to this. One of the most common things adults tell me in therapy about their childhood is that a feeling or a certain feeling, that feelings or certain feelings were not allowed in the home of their childhood. And I always talk about this. I don't think in these homes that there was a list of rules on the refrigerator, and one of them was don't feel. But their very clear and distinct experience was when they were upset, they were talked out of it or attempted. It was the attempt of others to try to talk them out of it. How many times do you do that? How many times do you give the solution, the answer? If you want to see something funny, Google after we're done, Google the nail in the sweater and feelings and watch the funny video between a husband and a wife where they talk about this. Right? So part of it is learning to sit with it, learning to deal with our own empathic misery, realizing that when we try to solve the problem, instead of just listen and empathize with it, we do several things. We disempower the other. We suggest to them that this is easy to solve. Right? It's a conscious choice not to feel sad or not to feel hurt. And we suggest, and what they'll do for us, I talked about this at the intensive with families in specific situations, is you will lose. They will find ways to make your advice, your reframe, your explanation wrong. Because they want you to feel that same hopelessness and powerlessness with that struggle. That same feeling, at least, with that struggle, with that pain. So they'll set up a situation where you can't win. And again, none of this is very conscious. In therapy, we call this ability to listen, to sit with, to be with somebody containing. Containing requires capacity, while psychological techniques and descriptions and diagnoses require very little capacity. All of your lectures, all of your speeches, all of your sermons, right? All of your fix-its, all of your explanations, that doesn't take a tremendous amount of talent or wisdom. Some of you might be more creative at it. I find myself to be a wonderful, wonderful lecturer to my children. I have great analogies and anecdotes and metaphors, but that's not what they need. And in some ways, I rob them of the struggle, right? I rob them of figuring out themselves. There are spaces for those other things, but it's not in response to a difficult emotion. It's in response to a question or problem solving where the child asks for and invites that. And that doesn't happen a lot because sometimes they want to figure it out themselves. So don't feel is the most prolific, most common, it's the common cold and the cancer, if you will, of these statements, these kinds of statements. Some of these fall under that category of don't feel. One of my, I was going to say favorite, but what I mean to say is least favorite examples is the phrase don't be sensitive or you're too sensitive. I can't think of something more irresponsible to even think towards a child, right? What we're really saying is I'm overwhelmed. It's too much for me. I can't sit with it. I'm uncomfortable with it. I can't stand it. It's grating on me. It's really a discussion, a comment on our capacity, right? Not the child's. And it's amazing because so much of therapy is trying to get people to get in touch with their feelings. And when we tell people that they're too sensitive and what the real process is that we're overwhelmed and incapable at the time, we cause such self-doubt, such confusion. I think I feel this way. I think it's an overwhelming feeling for me. I think I'm sad. I think I'm hurt. That while the meta message is something is wrong with you, the child learns self-doubt and questions their own truth. And the parent doesn't own and admit their own overwhelmness, their own lack of bandwidth, if you feel. You're selfish. This again falls in that category of things that grate on me, like when I hear people say that to their children. I can't think of things much more harmful than these kinds of things. It's hurtful because the child learns to deny their needs and their self. Then they spend the rest of their childhood and the rest of their life trying to find it again, but feeling guilty about it. Again, this is another example of a parent's lack of capacity, asking the child to get smaller. Your needs are too much for me. That's really about me. Because some parents have lots of capacity. Some parents have relatively little. I have some capacity with some people and less with other people. That's about me. But me trying to use this shame, right? To try to get you to get smaller so I can contain you, so I can tolerate you, so I can stand it, so I can be comfortable. You can see how quite obviously it's abusive and it's a lie. And also, I would say, when a child says, what's in it for me? My thought is, great question. Why would I want to offer some idea unless it was going to benefit your life? Now, there's short-sightedness, right? There is, at times, an unwise way that we deal with our needs, an unhealthy way that we deal with our needs, but the needs are there. And the person who looks greedy or gluttonous with their needs, that's just a wound. That's just something misaligned in them. That's a lack of awareness. That's based on fear. That's based on the narcissistic wound, all those things. And why would we use shame and judgment to try to heal a psychological wound? Right? The self-centered, selfish child is the child that didn't get seen, ironically. And why would we want to use more shame to try to solve that problem and that issue? I do everything for you. Gosh, as I read these, they just rub me so wrong. I do everything for you. First of all, it's not true. You don't do everything for your child. Nobody does. It's a lie, first of all. Second of all, it's one of the most damaging things that can happen for a child is the unlived life of a parent. It is very important that you take care of yourself and that it not become your child's responsibility. And what is this supposed to mean anyway? I do everything for you so you owe me? So you have to give back? Then you didn't really do it for them. You did it in exchange for something back from them that was unspoken. So if you do something for somebody, you don't mention it because you don't need anything back. Right? And what this prevents is the responsibility on the part saying it, that it's my job to take care of me, not yours. My serenity is my responsibility. My sense of fulfillment, my happiness is my responsibility, not yours. And lastly, it leaves the child with no place to put the hurt and the anger. If mom and dad are selfless, do everything for me, then how can I be angry at them? My anger and hurt must be concealed and repressed, and it must be a flaw in me. Something's wrong with me if I'm mad at these perfect, selfless people who only have my best interest in mind all of the time. It is another way to shut down the feelings that the child has of anger, resentment, hurt, disappointment, frustration with the parent that every child will feel at some points in their lives. You're just like your father and mother. I hear people, especially in split families, talk about this. Sometimes they don't say it to the child. Sometimes they say it to me or to others, but that gets translated. And the problem is it creates a divided loyalty. No matter how flawed that other parent is, I still identify with them. right? I still see part of myself. So even if my father or mother was abusive towards me, there's still a part of me. And so I'm learning to hate myself, to not love myself. And really that kind of statement, again, it's shaming, right? It's a way to shame the child. It's a way, of course, to also vent anger at the other parent, blame at the other parent. Those are all needs of the parent and meet none of the needs of the child in these examples. Um, all the shame that goes with these kinds of statements comes along with that. You make me feel. I'll simply put it this way: if a child can make you feel something, then you can make them feel something, right? If they make you feel scared, make you feel sad, make you feel disappointed, then you can make them feel angry, make them feel hurt. It doesn't own your feelings, doesn't make you responsible, doesn't make it your project, right? Teaching blame. See, if they're to blame for my unhappiness, then I can be to blame for their unhappiness, right? And that game never wins. Nobody wins in that. Nobody grows. Nobody progresses in that. Yes, there are things that you do that I am hurt by, but you don't make me feel that way. That's mine, and it becomes my job to sort out, to sort through. And it just develops, it's an overall lack of awareness, a lack of emotional intelligence in the family when we talk in those ways. And often we don't say, I don't want to say, I feel sad. I want to make it about you because it's a lot easier to deal with your flaws than with my responsibility. It's a lot easier for my wife and I, for example, to talk about each other's problems than it is to talk about our own response to that. You should, this is very broad, of course. You should. I don't even know what it means. Does it mean God wants you to? Does it mean you'll be good if you do? You'll be bad if you don't? It really has no, it doesn't make sense. You should. And there's qualifying statements like, if you don't want to get in trouble by the IRS, you probably should pay your taxes. If you don't want to get a speeding ticket, you probably shouldn't speed, right? You can use it in that context, but that's not what I'm talking about. But even in those examples, there's a different way to say it. My experience is that if I don't do X, then Y doesn't happen, right? You talk about it from your experience instead of shoulds. Shoulds are a problem for all of us. They're what many of our parents are battling against to find themselves, right? Both personally in their own life, but also in the relationship to their child. So shoulds are the dragon that Joseph Campbell, the philosopher, talks about, that we have to go and fight, that we have to go and free ourselves up, the shoulds and the should nots. So this becomes about, this is about trying to control other people instead of letting go and surrendering and speaking your truth and making your requests. This is about being right instead of sharing your thoughts, beliefs, feelings, experiences. This is where you say, in my experience, this is what's worked for me. This is what I know, but it's for me. I don't know if it applies to you. I don't know your truth, right? We have an idea because we're parents that we know our children's truth, and we don't know it. We have enough challenge finding our own truth. We don't know their truth. That's not even true, nor is it necessary for us to be healthy, effective parents. What we need to find in order to do that well is our truth. That needs to be our journey. And then we can show up with them in authentic, passionate, healthy, assertive, honest, and clear ways with them. But I don't get to decide what you believe, what you think, what you feel. I don't even get to decide what you should do. That's not what parenting boundaries are about. Parenting boundaries are about what I am going to do, how I'm going to respond, what I'm going to set up in my life, in my home, in my presence. And should has very little to do with all of that. You never and always. I included this. It's one of those general ones again because it's not true. It's overwhelming to get that kind of feedback. And it would be more helpful to just share the specific incident. We magnify it to the point of always or never to justify our feelings because we wouldn't feel justified. We're afraid we might not be listened to if we just give the event. So we exaggerate, we magnify, we generalize. It's a way of psychologically recruiting, right? If you're always unkind to me, of course I'm going to be upset. But if last night you were unkind to me, that might not be enough for me to feel like my upsetness is going to be heard or even justified. Why am I making such a big deal about it? Those would be voices I would have in my head from my own childhood, the peers of my childhood, the parents of my childhood, or maybe this relationship that I'm having with the person that I'm expressing. Maybe that's something I've heard from them. So I'm going to exaggerate or generalize it. So and so said so, or everyone thinks this, or Dr. Reedy said, or I talked to my friends, I talked to my girlfriends, talk to my friends. This is what they say. Talk to my brother. Talk to my school counselor. Talk to my therapist. Right? Recruiting again. This is called recruiting. Recruiting. It stems from a lack of a sense of self. If I'm the only one in the world that feels it and believes it, that's enough. Right? You don't have to be right. Because if you get in the game of you're right, then someone else is wrong. And that's an unwinnable thing, right? That's the war. But this is what I feel and believe and think. This is what's going on for me. There's no loss. There's no one who loses in that, right? So we replaced it with requests, boundaries, and I feel statements. It's more about being right and then being wrong. And you know what the fact of the matter is, just because more people say it or experts say it, believe it, doesn't make it true. I can think of, and you can too, numerous examples where many people believe it's the truth, or experts, quote unquote, say it's true, and we don't believe in it. We don't believe it's true. We don't agree with it. This is not, feelings and self are not a democracy, right? You are enough. You didn't know that because in your family of origin, in my family of origin, that wasn't enough. Because our family of origins, like the ones that we're struggling not to raise or to create it for our children, in our families of origin, for many of us, it was about being right. We had to be right. You feel X. What I mean by that is, I talked about it this week. Parents have a kind of X-ray vision. We all have kind of an X-ray vision with each other, right? I can see past your defenses. You could see past some of mine. I can see past my children's. You can see past your children. But it's invasive to go there without permission. It can inform us. If we know our child is feeling scared, but they're showing a tough exterior, that can inform us about how we respond. But to simply walk past somebody's wall, somebody's barrier, somebody's armor that they have out there in front of them that helps them to feel safe and secure is inappropriate, right? It doesn't meet their need in their life. It meets your need to be right again. Or really what it is, and I'll skip a bullet point, we do it because if I can point out to you what I know you're feeling beneath your armor, a couple of layers deep, then the behavior that I have, the limit that I'm going to set, the boundary that I'm going to set, the response that I'm going to have is justified by that. And it's harder to just know it, not say anything, and act accordingly. Right? To say, instead of saying, I don't think you are wise enough, mature enough to go out with these people this weekend and not make some bad decisions, right? We start talking about, I think you're insecure. I think you're just, you start saying that kind of stuff. No, nobody's going to listen to that and be open and warm for that. But it's just okay to say, I'm not comfortable with it. And I might be wrong. I'm not trying to be right here. It's harder to set a boundary. The discussion that we have when we use our X-ray vision and go past the barrier of the defense, the wall that's up there to protect them, and point it out without an invitation. We do that so that we can feel okay with our actions and our responses. It's terrifying. And what we try to do instead of is become an adult. What I hear, what I think, what I believe, that's going to inform me. It's going to inform me up here. That's why a lot of parents, they'll use what I say in webinars or sessions, and this, in fact, this is one of the other ones. They'll go back and says, Dr. Reedy says this. This isn't for them. This is for you, right? This is to inform you so you can show up like an adult. I skipped the bullet point on serve and return attachment. Serve and return is, give them what they're asking. At one level, accept at face value what they're saying. Not that you believe it, not that you don't see anything else, but don't go past that with them necessarily till they're ready. Getting a child to prying open that shell to get them to talk, that's not okay. But you're gonna record it. You're gonna know. Parents say to me, "Can I ask my child what they want, what they think?" Absolutely, every time, as often as possible. But you're not gonna give them everything based on what they ask for. But you're gonna listen. It's gonna give you an indication of how insightful they are, how mature, how wise they are, and then you're gonna make a decision with your boundary, with your privilege, with your whatever accordingly. You're so smart, talented, gifted, beautiful, etc. This sounds funny, but the research tells us that when we complicate kids' giftedness, we ruin them. It's from the book Nurture Shock. It is much more effective, helpful to praise the effort. See, if I tell you that you're smart, the research tells us that you're going to cheat or choose easier tasks to maintain that status of being smart. And besides that, it sets up this kind of tenuous pedestal that you stand on, right? You can fall off of it because we begin to equate this praise with love. You don't need to do that. You don't need to praise them that much. You can say things like, seems like you're working hard. Seems like that was really satisfying to you. That's something I think you could be proud of. I'm happy for you, right? We start to replace it with phrases like that are much more connected. These are born out of anxiety about wanting the person to feel something about themselves. And it has the reverse effect. If you want to read about it, go look at the book Nurture Shock and read about the chapter on praise. And it's replete with examples where praising a child's giftedness is not a helpful contribution to their esteem. I'm proud of you. I put this in parentheses. This is not a thing never to say, right? But I want you to be mindful of it. It's a slippery slope. Because we start to equate praise with love. Can you be unproud of them? And if so, is it really their job to make you feel proud? It seems like that's more about you than it is about them, right? I gave the example where Bob Dylan was asked about his son, if he was proud of his son with his #1 record. He said, it's irrelevant. And he wasn't just being his normal pissy person with the media, the person doing the interview. He was saying it's irrelevant. Whether he's a janitor or he gets into Harvard or he has a #1 album, or I'm not proud of him or not. I can be impressed by his effort. I can be impressed with some of his success, but that's a little bit different than proud. So be careful of this one. Be careful of this one because it can load very heavily onto a child. And they can begin to pay more attention to making you proud than finding out for themselves. And it doesn't tend to value the mistakes, right? One thing that a lot of children ask me indirectly over the years is, I want my parents, they don't use these words exactly, but basically, my parents don't value mistakes. Mistakes are just something not to do. There's no lesson in it. It's just wrong and bad and fix it instead of learn from it. So what are the take-homes? Instead of these kinds of statements, especially when your child tells you things like they're mad at you, they don't like you, they think you're a bad parent, right? They're hurt by you, they're upset with you. You respond with phrases like, thank you. I'm glad you're talking about this. I feel honored that you would share this with me. And for those of you who would tend to want to point out how well they said it, how respectfully they said it. You get to decide your boundary. I do not get to decide it. I can tell you that as I've done more and more of this work, my own work, in the past 20 years, I don't really care often how they say it. If I'm tired or exhausted or depleted emotionally, I do tend to pay attention to how respectful they are. But when I'm full, when I'm feeling okay, I'm more concerned with what would happen if they didn't share it with me. My therapist talks about this all the time. That people used to say to her, she's 70 something years old now. And they used to say to her when she was a young parent, I can't believe you let your son talk to you that way. And she would look at them and say, I'm just glad he's talking to me. And it didn't hurt her. She wasn't offended by it. And that tolerance, that capacity, that bandwidth didn't come from a poor self-esteem and boundaries. It came from the fact that she didn't need it necessarily. Sometimes I imagine there were times that she did. You get to decide what you can handle and own it. If they're disrespectful, like I said, people ask all the time, but what if they swear? What if they call me names? You get to decide if that's too much for you. There are times I can imagine when my child would swear at me and I would just be glad that they're talking. I'd be able to hear it. And there's times when I say, I can't do this right now. But that's just my boundary. Do your work so you know what you are saying. Allow yourself to be in therapy, to be at Al-Anon meetings, Codependence Anonymous meetings, to go to workshops, to go to intensives, to do what you can do to look at your work. Read the book. Read The Journey of the Heroic Parent. That's really what it's about. It's about understanding what's going on underneath. Right? Going a layer deeper, learning how to think. If you listen more, just if you can get your ears bigger, if you can learn to listen, your children will tell you all that you need to know. And you won't hear their symptoms as symptoms. You'll hear their symptoms more and more clearly as an expression of a pain, of a sadness, of a powerlessness, of a helplessness, of a fear. And then you'll respond to that and not to the symptom. Listening is the thing they need often. Much more than your lectures, your solutions, your sermons, your answers, your pep talks, your reframes, your rebuttals, your justification, explanations, etc. Listening is the cure. Listening is the connection. It's the anchor. It's the foundation. It gives them a sense of self that says, yeah, this is real, what I feel. Listening to feelings is one of the best things you can do to contribute to them moving through it. Oftentimes, it is the unlistened to, unaccepted feeling that is the one that stays stuck and fixated, that doesn't go away. The unheard resentment, the ununderstood resentment is the one that never leaves. The understood resentment, the listened to, the accepted resentment is the one that, why would you hold on to it if your parent has heard it and owned it and been okay with it and thanked you for it and told you that you're glad that they're glad that you're talking about it? Why would you hold on to that one? There'd be no reason. All right. I am happy to answer any questions. Well, this is a new webinar, one I haven't done before. I think it's one of the more important ones. When I tell my child that I'm just not comfortable with something he wants to do, he pushes me to give him a reason why I'm not comfortable, as that isn't enough for him. I get stuck here and end up saying, you're too mature, you are too mature. Do you have any good ideas of what to say when he wants? I'm not comfortable. I can't explain it. That's enough. It might not be enough for him. See, I've seen it out in the field. Um, I've seen it out in the field where um, parents who have this pattern that you've described, where they feel the need, the have to, the must, just because their child wants it, so they are reinforcing that. And then I gave this example the other day on the webinar. They do that with us at first too, and after a while they learn we're just going to. You can try explaining it to him. That's another thing. You can try explaining it to him. He'll just debate with you, and then he didn't want a reason. You'll know if he wants a reason if you answer and he says, "Oh, okay, I'm clear." But he won't say that. He'll debate with you. It's an invitation to a debate. But when we stop doing it, because it's a lot easier when it's not your child to get into this, the way they talk to us is they say, I have a request. Well, can you hear my request? Can I call my mom this week after the therapy session? Mom and dad. And I say, I hear your request. They say thank you and they walk away. Right? So they learn to respond to us. And if the why what really meant why, it would work. It won't work. It doesn't go away. Arguing with the teenagers, like getting in a fight with a pig in the mud. The pig enjoys it. It's a saying I saw it used to stand on the wall of our office at the first wilderness therapy program that I worked at. All right, folks. The play is coming up next month. October 26th is the opening night gala. Hope to see you there. We're going to have breakfast. We'll give you details soon on that breakfast with the Evoke team, with the Evoke partners and our spouses and a few of our therapists. Upcoming workshops and intensives. On the left side are the multifamily workshops, experiential, multifamily educational. On the right side, if you want to do deeper work, the Heroic Journeys is for families. We're doing one in October for families, and it is the 14th to the 17th. We have room for one more family. Finding You is for individuals. We're going to do that one again back in Park City in November. So if you want to go and do deep work, family of origin, that's what that is for. That's what I just finished this afternoon, and I can tell you, it is the greatest feeling to finish that because so many people get out of it so much. We would like all individuals to go to 12-step support groups. We would like you all to go to 6 while your child is with us. If you haven't started now, start. If you know nothing else, you'll know a little bit about what it feels like for your child to be asked to do what they're doing. So if nothing else, it gives you empathy. Hopefully it gives you a lot more than that. Upcoming parent support groups, New York City, Los Angeles, Bay Area there. LA is this weekend. 14th. Some of you, I guess if you're at the one in New York City, you're not watching this. So that was tonight. Los Angeles is this Sunday. It's a potluck from 4 to 5, and then 5 to 7 we will do it. It's on Sunday, so we're getting you out of the traffic and hopefully committing you to bring some food. So Bay Area will be the next night, and then we have one coming up in Toronto. We have one in New York City every month, of course. You can go to our website for more on that. Follow us on social media for announcements. Some of you sometimes don't get announcements. So if you are on social media, follow us there and you'll see announcements there. The Evoke blog, of course. The pursuit trips are high adventure trips for families or young adults. Therapy Light. The book is on Amazon. Go to our Parent Foundation book page and you can get books for the same price, and a percentage goes to charities. Haven't decided on the topic for the next webinar. I'll bring that out in the next couple of days. But the next webinar will be Wednesday, September 18th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, because I'm going to be in Los Angeles in the Bay Area on Monday and Tuesday. All right, folks. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us. Hope these points of contact are helpful. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.